we had some huge storms come through in regional Victoria and in around Melbourne. And I made the observation that it was interesting to see how quickly the SES and the firefighters and all the support crew were straight out there, and it was blowing a gale and it was still raining and it was horrible. And we all had a bit of an exchange just before that commitment is something you do when it's hard, when it's icky, when it's not pretty, and you still get up and get out there. And I think that really shines through with the commitment of these volunteers, for example. And we're going to explore, I'm sure, lots of areas of commitment in terms of what are we committed to in our lives. But I think at the heart of it, it really is when you commit to something, it's a bit like the marriage commitment, right? Through sick and sin.
Then you vows.
And look, I know there's reasons why people split and separate, and I've been, married and divorced, so I'm not making a comment about that. But when we commit to something, it doesn't mean that it's easy. When you commit to something, it's not something that you walk away from when things get really tough. And I'm not talking about marriage now, so please don't take this in that context. But when we commit to a path, or when we commit to being always in change and always open and always learning, those journeys are not easy, but you commit to them. The SES guys, they've committed to helping and serving when it's really difficult, when the conditions are really hard. And you don't hear them, well, maybe you do hear them whinging. The firefighters, that is a real commitment. They commit to doing things when it's tough, when everyone else is still tucked in bed, nice and cozy, and it's blowing a gale and it's raining, and they're out there. And I think for us, if as humans, if we're committed to a path of growth and a path of learning, then we've got to be prepared to get out there in the rain and the wind and the hail and get through it. And commitment is actually about doing something. It's not about sitting back and waiting. It's actually about doing.
It is. It's spot on. Commitment to spiritual practice. Brilliant segue. I just want to, if it's all right with everybody, I just want to go into the spiritual, open up with a prayer.
Yes, thank you. That was totally missing in the space right now, that holding of our starting prayer.
And that's the point of why I didn't do commit to protocol to start with. That is the point.
Beautiful segue. Okay, pulikako. Na akua, na aumakua, e poe kahiko, mahalo and aloha na akua. Na akua, we ask that you bless the lands that we all are standing on, the different First Nations, the lands that never ceded, and give our aloha and our thanks to the people past, present, and emerging. We ask you to protect us from the kolohe and the kepalo, and shield us from their prying eyes and ears. And allow us to go into conversation here today on Facebook Live as wise guides in the wise room, and the discussion about commitment. We ask that you guide us through letting the words that are needed to be heard, letting the discussions that are needed to be had, and stay with us all of the way. I'm sending you this prayer with the ancient and traditional words. Eyamama, 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 mahalo na akua. Mahalo. I just felt there's a big missing piece. And Christina,
oh, sorry, no, go.
I was just going to acknowledge what Christina was saying around commitment, but it's a good segue into that protocol that you're going to add to.
Well, the point I was making, which is why I also didn't answer your message to me, was we cannot say that we are committed to something and then not do it. Do you know, because the shape of our lives tells us what we are truthfully committed to or not. And that's something that we've been discussing in one of our courses as we hit up against this whole notion of truth and how do we actually live the truthfulness of truth. Because we can't say we are committed to spiritual practice, but then not do any spiritual practice.
Yeah.
We can't say that we are committed to personal development, but they're not put into place what we've learned or what we've read or what's, you know, shaping our interest. Because then that just becomes playing out. It becomes another form of trickery or self-trickery. So that's my really, you know, my where my thinking is around commitment. You know, the shape of our lives tells us what we are truthfully committed to or not. And I think that is the slippery slope for people, all of us, people and people, is, you know, commitment calls me into really standing my ground with myself and with other people.
Mm-hmm. And absolutely, and again, from the spiritual practice perspective, truth of where you're standing and coming back to that volunteers piece, it is, it becomes, whether you're volunteering to go and cut down trees because there's been a storm, and that's a commitment in itself, and whether you're committed to doing a spiritual practice, whether you're committed to do your inner work, right? There's the word that we keep bringing up, there's a discipline around that, right? The discipline of the practice meaning repeat, 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 that it becomes so natural that those volunteers and yourself in whatever we're practicing, spiritual practice means you're practicing it, or you're going out there. If there is a storm, you know you're going to be called on. I'm going to use another word, a duty, right? That you've committed to.
A duty to self.
Mm.
If you're committed to that.
If you're
You
committed.
may not be committed to that.
And then you're disciplined to doing it, right? Just discipline gets you there in that sense. And I've known through my munching around the spiritual self-development space for years, I had fantastic strategies on how to avoid it. Like really good ones. You know, well, I'll take a bit of that and then I'll practice that, and that's good. And then something comes along and a great distraction that, so that's not important anymore. I'll spin around here and have a bit of that. And then you bump into something, or I'll go back to that. But going back to that can no longer be there for you because you left it and you moved on. And so you got to start somewhere, and it got to become part of you if you're going to commit to bringing it to making a change for yourself. So yeah, strategy. I know about avoidance strategies around stuff. Played with that, and actually still do. You know, the truth of it, still do. Less so, but still do. Have some avoidance strategies. But that's going off track. Let's get back to the commitment of the commitment.
I think, you know why this is a tough subject? Because it calls every single person who considers it into exposing their vulnerabilities. Every single person. Because, you know, to talk about commitment also means that we engage risk of exposure of, okay, well, I don't do that.
I don't do that all of the time as well. You know, it's kind of like I do that, but not all the time.
Or I do that when it suits me.
Oh, yes.
Exactly. And when is that? You know, when are those times when it suits you, I wonder?
When it's a sunny day. Not when it's raining, not when it's blowing a gale. And that's when you really need to be committed, right? That's the point.
The
Yeah,
icky
and that's
bit.
the question. What takes a person out of that place of commitment? You know, we all work with people who want, including ourselves, who are aspiring to move from where they are into something else.
Look, it could be limiting, but there's a whole range of things that play into that. And I think it's too cut and dry to say, well, you're not really committed. And at one level, in a black and white world, you can say you're not really committed. But as you've just kind of asked the question, what comes beneath that? And there's quite a few things that might be limiting beliefs. It might be, I can't really do that, or I don't really deserve that, or gee, if I do that, I'll truly be seen and then I'll be exposed as a fraud or whatever. And for different people, it'll be different things that sit behind that. In a perfect world, it's like, get out in the rain. Don't think twice about it. Get out in the rain, just do it. It's like, oh gee, the cozy bed's nice. And
that's what and that's what you're feeling when you're doing inner work. That's what it's like around inner work, right? When you bump up against the hurty bits, or they're like, this is too hard, it's freaking me out, I don't like it, you know, I'm drained, and they all become labels to go like, then I can't go on. And I remember in early therapy days, right, of cancelling appointments, right, being quite frivolous about it. I don't think I was being frivolous about it. I was just going somewhere else that was a bit more
better. You had a better option.
Oh, it's over, yeah, you know, more distraction over there. That's good. Takes me away from all that feelings, make me feel good. My fix, going out for coffee, going to friends, going to whatever. And I really don't know how many times that happened. My therapist did, because my therapist sat down one day when I did turn up for the session, and said the words, "Are you committed to these sessions?" And I'm like, sure I am. And they said, well, are you committed to once a month? Are you committed to weekly? Are you committed to fortnight? Are you committed to once every 6 months? You tell me how much commitment you are in these sessions. How, in other words, how important is this for you? And that was in that moment, I was like, oh, this is my strategies. This is my avoidance strategies, right? I mean, I wasn't that conscious about it. Don't get me wrong. I was like, oh, bloody hell, that's a bit like, oh, that's a bit confronting.
I think most people are unconscious. Like if you challenge them on it, they'll go,
when you call it,
wow, ooh, didn't see that.
And you have reflection about it, and you're like, yeah, well, yeah, actually, you know, I'm being that's a bit frivolous. I'm not committing, and you know, and that is why I'm in therapy. You know, that's one of the reasons why I'm in therapy, is not to use avoidance and things like that. And so it became, where's the priority list? And I was like, it's up, and it's staying up.
I think you touched on a very important phrase which really hit me, which is, how important is this to you? Like we hear so many, and I have lots of conversations with people that they want to make a change. They're tired of being in their rut, or they keep going round in circles with their whatever victim story or poverty story or whatever the story is that they've got. But then it's like, how important is it to change? Because the control is always with us. Make no mistake, the control is always here. The decision, the power is always here somewhere. But how important is it to us truly? And it actually takes a skilled hand to guide that conversation through, because you're right, it is in most people's blind spots. We don't set out intentionally to consciously intention. Maybe some people do, but you know, a lot of us don't. It's just like you said, it's response mechanisms, it's safety, it's our inner world trying to protect us from some perceived threat or vulnerability or shame or something that we haven't even consciously processed.
And the thought of, and sometimes the desire and the want is so much not as strong as the experience in our experience. But I mean, eventually I know it bites you on the backside. And you
keep going round. The thing is, you do keep, you know, I look back now and I go, wow, I went round and round for so many years. And I look back now and go, wow, I decided not that. I chose not that. and I committed to something else, and it meant that I had to change, that I had to change what was going on in my inner world, and I had to change how I behaved out in the outside world. So, you know, boundary management, looking after self, not letting people walk all over me, or not feeling like I had to do certain things. So you actually have to make changes to get the outcomes that you want to actually be the commitment that you are.
Yeah.
It all requires action. It doesn't happen in inaction. It doesn't happen. Yes, it's important to set intentions, and it's important to have prayer and have alignment between your energetic self and the way you are in the world. Yes, all of that, but it requires action. Internal action and external action.
See, for me, commitments come from a different place first. Like I've got a really strong belief in that life will guide me, and that if some doors open, then I will, and that sometimes my prayer allow me to see the next steps, or just my next step. And I've always been, through that belief, guided like that. Like 21 years I jumped onto a plane because that was my next step. And it costed courage to do so, and there was that commitment to do so as well. But it wasn't so much the commitment that was difficult, because until then I was guided to that door that was opening. It was then more so the commitment to the consequences of that decision, that sometimes you have no idea what you're stepping into. And then there's also, you know, there's also different spaces at times we have to make commitments. If you're dealing with great loss, like grief or trauma, then sometimes just getting up in the morning, getting out of bed is a commitment. Putting clothes on is a commitment. You know, there's so many different, I'm still trying to get a sense of what I actually can contribute about it, because there's so many different aspects to commitments. Yes, there's commitment to your inner work, but again, it's what place are you entering that inner work from? Are you searching? Are you questing? Are you curious about yourself? Or have you just hit a point where it's like, I can't live like that anymore? Or are you actually in a big space where just getting up in the morning is a commitment? Are you dealing with mental health, you know, which I'm learning a lot about at the moment in my own family? It's completely different commitments again, because as big as your intentions are and your courage is, or your commitment is, that can look very different in 5 minutes again. And yes, a lot of that is in our control, but in that moment it isn't, if that makes sense. If for my family member that anxiety takes over, she might have had the greatest intentions that when that comes again, then she will put all of these things in place and will do this and this and this. But when that energy comes over, then it looks different again. And then the commitment might just be to breathe for the next 5 minutes and to look around you, so you can ground yourself again. I don't know why I'm finding it so hard to actually speak about it today. There's just nothing that sort of comes together for me that, you know, that usually I sit in a subject and it unfolds and then it comes up. But today I find it very challenging to actually find a thread that I can follow, that I think, yeah. But for what it's worth, that's my 2 cents.
I think for me, commitment has more purposefulness about it. I absolutely hear what you're saying around the challenges of mental health, but when I think about when I commit to something, there's a purposeful decision, and then I choose to work, I choose to work hard at having alignment between my beliefs and my behaviors and how I am in the world and how I show up. And the commitment might be really tiny, like, you know, you were saying at times when there's challenges, the commitment might be just to breathe, and that might be like one of the steps, but you're making a purposeful commitment to take a breath.
Yeah.
So that you're calming down. But I guess I see commitment as a different expression, and not just around some of the smaller everyday. And I'm not suggesting that mental health is every day, far from it.
There can be massive commitments sometimes. Just to get out of bed can be a massive
Absolutely.
commitment for somebody. Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think one of the key things that you said, and it's an interesting point, you know, and you talked about the belief and commitment, yet belief and commitment are not necessarily the same thing.
No.
And I think that's what Christina's saying, you know, somewhere along the line, it has to move into action. But what I'm hearing is, you know, when we speak of commitment, yes, we draw a line in the sand with ourselves, like something's not right here and I need to do something, but it's not, but like in our teachings, everything's layers and levels, right? Everything. And we learn to understand the world that way. But sometimes that line in the sand, you know, moves because you move. And so even if it is, okay, well, I'm committing to doing, you know, like you said, just breathing through something. Okay, that's the action. You've made that commitment. Then next, there's a new line in the sand. Like the line in the sand doesn't have to be a fixed point back there.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Do you know? But I also think this whole thing is interesting because, you know, and if we're moving into like to spiritual practice or personal development, or how can I grow into the person I aspire to be, you know, there's also this whole thing, which is to your point, Deborah, around, you know, people who just go to course after course after course after course, but they don't seem to move anywhere. You know, and they sometimes like to put that under the banner of I'm a lifelong learner. And of course that, you know, I'm that too. I'm interested in that as well. But there's also the point where it's about getting off the merry-go-round of, you know, courses and into doing this, what you're saying, Christina, into actually doing something that moves the needle.
And moves the energy, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's coming out of that. I think the courses is coming out of the wideness that's on offer, right? Because there's wide range of everything, and where am I in there? Course after course can also be an avoidance strategy, right? As well as an exploration. Where is the path that leads me somewhere? In another session, we've had that conversation about stuckness and things like that. It's so something can lead you somewhere. And using today's subject, if you've made a decision that you have the commitment to, right? It's going back to creating. It's an action. It's a conscious decision that you're going to follow something, or you're still going to stay. And I think, from my experience, kind of flaying in the big wild world of just like going to a big food festival and tasting everything, but not actually committing to having a meal, isn't it? It's like, I'm just going to taste everything. But I don't know what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. You know, I'm not.
I think some of the courses can be good, because that is part of that journey and that part of adventure and exploration and trying things on. And is there an alignment here, and trying that on? Does this feel like there's an alignment there? But if you're doing those courses, I think an important part of it, even if the course is done well, is about that period of reflection. And if you're not reflecting, if you're not then saying, I've got a commitment to that, or I'm choosing that, or I'm deciding that, or I'm not deciding that, I think there's still this process of, oh, that feels good. Mm-hmm. That feels nice. Okay, I'll keep that. And other things not. There's still this period of reflection, I think. Mm-hmm. If you're doing that, so that you can actually make a commitment to what is right for you and be authentic. because being authentic is a commitment in itself, and that's really challenging.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Having
yeah.
said, just be authentic. Do you know how hard that is for most people?
Mm.
It is super, super, super challenging to be authentic. Super
Because it's linked to commitment.
Because you
as
have to
well.
be committed, right? And that means you get to see all the uglies, you get to see the good, the bad, you get to see the mistakes, you get to see the little pieces of shame, you get to see the I'm not good enough, the vulnerable part of me, the grumpy part of me, the intolerant part of me.
And then you've got to practice, what you've learned about yourself in your authentic self. And that's not a natural place. Inner feeling would be a natural place, but I have to now, well, I have to follow my commitment to that, because that's what I've decided I'm going to be. I'm going to be, where's my authenticity? How do I show the world my authenticity when I've been feeling it for so long? And what do I have to do around that? And then you've got to practice that. And if you practice that around an old environment with people who know you with old behaviors, then isn't that a fun time to be had? The potential of ridicule, the potential of like, who are you? And where your inner self is screaming, but this is me. I've always been this, but you're actually practicing the true, authentic me that I've found. And so it's very difficult, as it's difficult, it's also, I kind of want to turn that difficulty into, it's a curious exploit, it's an adventure. It's an adventure, but it takes commitment.
It takes commitment.
Because it's the pathway to transformation. It's the pathway, and there's all these things along that pathway. But it calls you into this whole thing that we've talked about before, around the truthfulness. And it also calls a person into really acknowledging self-love, because you can't move without that, because otherwise you're always colluding against yourself. No matter how much you tell me, I'm committed to this kind of a life, but if I don't see the ingredients there, or even small steps toward that, then all the things that what you've been talking about are the derailers to that. Because that's that's about getting too hard, because I haven't, in our teachings at least, I haven't made the number one relationship in my life be my spiritual one. That's why we teach that. It has to be the number one, because it has to be important enough that I do what needs to be done to be in that relationship. And that relationship is a reflection of this relationship. And yes, there are derailers of that, which are mental health, and those things happen, at different stages of our life. But as we when we are an adult, where we have the kuleana, the responsibility to ourselves, only we can make that decision, is what I'm hearing. I'm just summarizing really. What I've heard. Only we can make that decision. It's also why in our teachings we have the place of pu'uhonua, where we go, like you're talking about, for reflection. And we, I create that in my own life, because there are times where I just have to sit back and say, I had to do this just 2 weeks ago. I'm not a kumu between the hours of 10 and 12. I'm a kumu 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. And that's really, really hard, because it means I'd like to go off and do things that are not that and get into mischief. But I've made this commitment to, this is how I live now. And it's hard. It's hard, that is what I'm saying, you know, to make the commitment to something that is so important to you that it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
You know,
And I
you
think
do what it takes to get there.
It's a purposeful decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think anything else, if you haven't purposefully decided, you're just going with the flow. So I don't think, for me, going with the flow isn't commitment. So
But the
choose
commitment
purposefully
can come out
decided.
of that. If you work that way, you're guided to something, and earlier or later you will have to make a commitment. Do I walk through that door? Do I cross that bridge? Do I, you know, there will always be that time when you have to make a commitment for or against whatever it is that calls. But
We're always at choice. And I think this is, again, the illusion that we somehow don't have power in our lives to make decisions.
We have huge power.
We are the only ones
I
who can make the
am
decisions.
frightened that I got so much power. I feel like a wizard sometimes with a wand. I got that much power, right? I'm actually scared of my power.
I think most of us are.
Because I haven't learned how to like really manage that power in a positive way. And there's commitment to self, right? I mean, the biggest commitment ever is to myself, not to anybody else, to myself. And that's hard. That's hard because I've got to stand in my responsibility around that. And sometimes I don't want to be responsible.
Well, because you have to be an adult.
I don't want to. I want to go play.
And then you have to deal with consequences of those decisions. So every decision has a consequence, right?
Yeah.
Every
Every consequence
decision
come
has a
around and your mother picking you up in the car. Isn't that consequence? You know,
It's a very interesting point you make, and I think it's a really another discussion topic, and that really is around power and what we understand by it. I don't think we've actually talked about that before, but what you actually mean by power. And, you know, when I feel disempowered, when I feel like I can't move, yeah, because I feel like I am committed truthfully to something, but I can't for the life of me figure out how I'm supposed to get there, or what is the next even one step, because, you know, the reality might be, there may be a whole myriad of realities. I don't have any money. I don't have any support. I don't have anyone to look after my children while I go off and do whatever, you know, someone's suggesting, or the book I've read, or what I've researched on the internet. I think that's a very important part of this discussion, but it's a discussion all on its own. You know, because that, you know, if we talk about what commitment is, we also have to consider, well, what takes us out of that, what moves us further away, what moves us toward, and what are we going to, how do we find our way, which is really what all our talks are about. How do we find our way?
I find my way with coming to myself first. Always coming to myself first, and finding, and somebody can help me with that, right? And somebody in particular can call out the pathways, let's say, you know, like the pathway, you know, are you committed to this? And it kind of wasn't saying, are you committed to me? And that, going back to that therapist, it was a very important question. Are you committed?
How much do you want this?
How much do I want to do this? Spoke about it, did it, some actions, delayed it, maneuvered around it, and so it is. And the question was, I'm like, yeah, I'm committed to it, so I'm going to do it. I mean, would you go into university spending 60,000 on a master's degree and never rocking up?
So I've done that.
Knock you off.
I did that, like, you know, 3 universities. One of them said to me, each one said, eventually you're gonna have to commit to being here or not here. And I said, great idea, I'll commit to not being here.
Yeah. but you made a commitment, right? Well, but that's the point. You made a decision to commit to either doing it or not doing it. But the question was posed to you. And I just kind of wonder, I don't think I have ever got to making a decision around commitment without somebody asking me a question about it. I don't think, I can't recall if I've ever asked myself the question. 2 marriages down as well, might I add, so I'm saying nothing.
I'm there with you.
I think I might be swayed by, I've got a really nice dress and I've got a party to go.
Actually, it's interesting, you know, we joke about marriages, but my second marriage, I made a commitment, even though somewhere deep inside, I knew it was the worst thing for me and that I hadn't done enough work on myself, and that I married somebody because they loved me, not because, although they showed interest in me and they said they loved me, not because I was choosing purposefully. I was choosing somebody who chose me. I didn't choose them.
Mm-hmm.
And the marriage lasted 6-7 months. It was the worst time of my life, and it was the best time of my life because that's what catapulted me onto this journey. So I am eternally grateful to him coming into my life, but gee, did I make a mess of that? Because I had so much going on that was unhealthy in my internal world that I made a commitment to something I should never have committed to, ever. So why is Christina looking wiser, Christina? Looking back now, I would never have even dated him. He just doesn't tick any of the boxes.
Oh, go girl.
But at that time, you know, I met him within 6 or 7 months. We were married, we were engaged, we were married quickly thereafter. And, you know, 18 months from beginning to end, it was all over Red Rover. Bought a house together. I knew inside, I knew it was the wrong thing to do, but I still did it for a whole bunch of reasons that I've now figured out. And if you're listening to this and have had similar things happen to you, it's possible. You need to work through what it is that's taking you into either making commitments to the wrong things or running away from those commitments. And it all comes back to really understanding yourself, and back to Julia, understanding the seeds of your living and understanding what your foundations are. And if you have really strong foundations, and then you've got to build on those, as Julia said, there's layers and layers and layers and layers and layers. Then when the big storm comes, you don't get rooted like those trees did in the storm last weekend. They literally got 100-year-old trees were literally lifted up and turned on their ground. And if you've got strong foundations, you'll sway a bit, you'll rock a bit, and you'll come back. You'll come back.
And also to add, is a Julia comment as well, which is, if you made a decision to do something and you don't like where you are, you make another decision to get out of where you don't like where you are.
Actually, that's not me. That's my kumu.
Okay. But it's a really
it's
good
the traditional teaching.
You know, you're not stuck somewhere.
No, exactly. And I made the decision to get out. But gee, what an experience. And I'm sure there's others that have had similar, you know, you choose a job, you go to a job because you're either desperate or you want the money. I've done that too. Gee, I've taken a job that I should never have taken because I needed the money. And it was the worst experience in my entire life. I hated every moment of it. In fact, I came home and I cried every night. For 6 months, I cried. And then I left.
And I tell you what's pinging for me as you were speaking, and that is about commitment and talking about your marriages and, you know, the length and what happened. And even though you knew deep inside you had that feeling, it's also about understanding when we have made decisions that, or committed to something, of knowing what need we were trying to get met. Because that's where the healing is, right? That's where the self-awareness is. You know, why did I get on a plane and go to Australia? Why did I marry that person? You know, why did I study that course and spend all that money and now I'm not even doing anything with it. Like, you know, we could just continue to, you know, list those things, because the fundamental question is, what was I trying, what need did I want to get met? Because that also tells us, well, we call it our pohaku, but where our baggage is, you know, that's what we're trying to get met. You know, I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be loved unconditionally. I wanted to, you know, have a family. I wanted to, you know, live that page 64 of the manual. Whatever.
I wanted to live a Mills and Boon life.
Whatever it is. And that's part of understanding. And that's why talking about commitment is really important, because the question is really, what am I committed to? Which also means, you know, where are the gaps? What is weighing me down? What habits and patterns do I keep repeating over and over again? Because underneath that, talking about the layers, you know, we've got to peel that back. And that's why that's the hard piece, because there's a piece of us that knows I got to keep looking at these lumps under the carpet. My lump is just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and there's only so
And I
many
wanna call it
doorways
something
avoided.
else.
Or for some
There's only so many ways I can go around it.
Or for some people, they just fall into a pattern of trying to fix things and work harder at it and try and work harder and harder and harder, when really the decision should be something different.
Yes.
Yeah, I was in touch with that actually as well. I like that when you said I, you know, signed up for a $60,000 course and never turned up, because somehow responsibility and commitment and all of that seems to hold something that requires courage and you know, and is hard sometimes. But I like that there's also commitment to our joy and happiness, and to things that you know, don't have to be necessarily hard. So I think that's very important to bring in as well. If your life is always full of responsibility, then maybe your commitment should be to give yourself a day or two of being carefree and crazy and you know, doing things that you usually don't do. So I think that's really important as well, to lighten, sorry about that, the word commitment, you know, it's the self-care in it, and that usually is a beautiful thing.
And that in itself requires people to do the work. You know, I've recently done a course on managing burnout, and the people that most suffer from burnout are usually those that are perfectionists or the high achievers, and that's been scientifically validated. But try and tell a high achiever or a perfectionist to slow down or stop.
Yeah.
Just try. Because, you know,
or a mother, you know, single mother or whatever, tell her to slow down when the kids need this and that. And
so there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be unpacked in all of that, in order to allow someone to give themselves the permission to stop. And that in itself requires that inner exploration and that commitment to self. So for some, it's really difficult to ask them to go play.
Yeah.
But play doesn't necessarily mean excluding something, you know, that you enjoy doing that is hard either, because, you know, that is sometimes a source of enjoyment and a source of being with yourself. You know, that's another interesting concept when people say, well, I need time out, or I need time off, or I need to slow down, or whatever, because the words that I heard you all say was need.
Yeah.
You know, the truth's in the language.
Yeah.
Because people are perfectionists and whatever, because the back part of the backstory is, you know, if I'm not that, you'll see all my foibles and my weaknesses.
Yeah. Correct.
So
it's all around protection.
It's so hard to keep it, you know. So if my washing piles up in the corner, people, you know, oh, my friend might come around and see all the washing piled up. They'll think I'm this.
I'll be judged.
So I have to be the perfect wife, you know. I've got hundreds of clients over the years where I've had that story with it, you know, have to be the perfect wife, have to be the perfect mother, have to be the perfect worker, whatever it is, because we're so fearful of what we might be measured by, which is not our own ruler, our own seeds of living, our own importances, but what we believe other people.
Exactly. That's
And that's how we are often brought up.
I won't be long.
That's
And
exactly.
often we have grown up and have learned that that's how we are loved. You know, if we work hard, if we do this, then we are loved. And so that goes back to often very early stages. And
Absolutely. It's
Well,
foundational, very early.
It could be in your culture.
Yeah,
You could be living your culture, not necessarily what you
exactly,
learn. Bringing up, but your cultural expectations.
Exactly. Or ancestral story, you know. It's really complex. We are so complex as human beings.
But it can be unpacked, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. You know, that, and I would challenge that, because our teaching is, you know, life is simple, people make it complex. And that the hidden meaning of that is do your inner work, right?
Yeah.
That's what the old people mean.
Yeah.
And the more work you do, the simpler your life becomes. I was just, you know, reflecting on that a little bit today. I was reflecting on things that happened a number of years ago and how much drama there seemingly was. And I don't have drama now. And I've committed to no drama, which means I'm different in the world. I don't engage in certain things. I process things differently. So there isn't the drama in my life like there used to be.
And I think that's really important in any personal growth journey, is to be able to take that breath and to be able to, for want of a better word, look around and self-assess and go, well, you know, how is my life changing or changed? And how have I changed? Because that's the positive reinforcement of, oh yeah, no, I didn't notice it because I'm in it. You know, I'm the fish in the bowl or whatever that, I don't know that story, but
just got to keep scrambling.
Whatever it is, you know, the fish doesn't know it's in the water, whatever that story is. And that is the, you know, that is the journey of personal change and personal healing. That you get to that point and go, oh, hey, this is what I'm recognizing about myself.
So then therefore a commitment probably could also be explained as an intention with moving towards your intention. Like not just setting an intention saying, I want to be more lighthearted, but have that intention with the movement towards it.
I think
commitment.
Movement is the key word for me, which is going back to the takeaway is commitment is an action.
It has to be an action, but it has to be an action that takes you towards that. And for some, it might need unpacking because the action might not be taking you towards it. It might be taking you away from it if you don't have the insight. If that makes sense. It goes back to Deborah's story around the avoidance. And there's we make our lives very complicated. And if there's not somebody guiding you sometimes, if you're really committed, you need to make sure that you actually are taking purposeful action in the right direction, as opposed to self-sabotaging and moving away from where it is that you're heading. Because
it's about the aspiration of living. You know, when you said be about moving toward intention, you know, I think it's about, we can all craft an aspiration for ourselves. You know, I'm not the woman I aspire to be, but I know what that looks like. That's when I talk about my seeds, I know that those where they are. I know what it looks like. But it does take continual effort to get there because, you know, each one of us have to deal with the biggest obstacles, and they are other people.
And there's too many of them in the world.
You know, other people that we can easily say, well, you know, it's Christina prevents me from being that. You know, it's not Christina. That's where this whole thing around commitment comes in. She may be part of it, but it's what I feel about her that makes it.
Right. And maybe presenting as or through somebody, but it's my feelings about the presentation of it.
But I agree with you. It is about movement toward that aspiration of how you want to be in the world, who you want to be, and what does that really look like, feel like, sound like, taste like. And of course, you know, if you're not that, that's what the movement is about.
Mhm.
And I also really 100% agree with what you were saying, Deborah. A person needs someone external to them to help them do that. You know, you need a helper.
It's
At
too
some
dark.
point.
It's a too dark a situation, like Christine said, to try and unpack on your own.
Well, because you don't know what you don't know, but the other person sitting outside holds that. They hold the things for you when you can't. They won't collude with you on your stuff and, oh, it's okay to be messy. Well, you know, it's okay to be messy for this point, but it can't continue to be messy, because you stay messy, you stay in a place of pain. You know, that to me, I hear that so often in courses, and people come and tell me about their messiness, but really that's collusion. That's collusion. You're colluding against yourself, and you know, that's what your friends do because they're your friends. But the professional helper is like the professional friend that says, I hold you through this a little bit. You know, I'm not going to collude with you and allow you to stay there.
And
but if you want to, that's your decision. But I'm not going to work. I'm not going to collude on that.
And that in itself is a, you know, it's not just walking out there and the next person you sign up as your counselor is going to do that awesome job, because sometimes you have to try 5, 6, 10 or more people before something in you feels like, yes, now I'm moving into my authentic direction. This is not, you know, like difficult to explain, but you know, there's a lot of professionals out there that also don't maybe dive into their inner work enough, and then that muddles up with your own things as well. So it's really important to find that person that provides you that movement towards your aspirations.
Enough awareness to make sure that you haven't chosen someone who colludes in your story so that you can continue to feel good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Doesn't that happen? You know, and I say that to my clients too, you know, you've got to kiss a lot of frogs. And I certainly did. So it's time for us to bring this conversation to an end. It's been challenging. It's hard. It's hard to talk about commitment. It's hard to talk about commitment because at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, where am I not committed? You know, where is that showing up in my life? You know, I'm having all these conversations myself. So Deborah, what is your life hack? What is your piece of advice around commitment and people who find committing challenging?
Is my takeaway advice always is seek help, seek assistance, and commit to that. Finding the right one. It's not always the first one. But the one. it's not the one. You're not the one. It's not necessarily the one. It's finding a place of compassion about commitment to yourself if you don't feel like you're getting anywhere. Like, be compassionate with yourself, but being a knowing, right? That commitment doesn't always have to be so harsh. That's what I would say to people. Be kind to yourself, because it is by that action alone, you will be committing to your own self-love path. And then you'll find somebody that will help you along the way, and it won't be harsh and traumatic. Because that self-love door opens as soon as you commit to it. You don't have to wait for it to arrive.
Christina?
I've used this phrase a bit in this call. So decide purposefully. And then I'll use a Spanish expression, poco a poquito. Then take the little baby steps that you need to get you there. Don't, because for some it's going to be really overwhelming to try and take that, you know, how do you eat an elephant kind of expression. So just take those little steps every day and have that continuous movement in a positive direction.
Mm. Yeah, for me, it's probably in between the two of you. It's maybe to start off with getting to know commitment, you know, and every day set yourself a little commitment and feel how wonderful it actually feels when you have committed and you achieve what you have committed to. You know, start with little things that are easily achievable, and then move towards bigger things, but really get to know commitment, and the joys that come from having committed to certain things, because there's a lot of self-care in commitment, and to get to know that, so it's not just a scary word, but it's actually something you are moving with. I think it could be a nice start towards it.
And for me, my guidance would be to sit back and take a breath and ask 2 questions. And one of those questions is, what needs to change in my life so that I am happy? And in our teachings, we have the teaching around 100% happy 100% of the time. And whenever I say that to any client, they all guffaw at me. But that is the teaching, and it is achievable. And it's actually what we teach in one of the courses that we're running at the moment. But it is, you know, asking that fundamental question. And the other question is, who is it I aspire to be? And then it can work, you know, which was my own thing. Then I worked backwards from that point. Well, if that's what I aspire to be, and that's what needs to change in order for me to be there, oh my dear, that's far away. I'm very far away from that. But there'll be one thing that presents when you know what, you know, get a bit of an idea about where you're heading and what you need to head towards, which may change as you grow into yourself. And that's important as well. It's all about growing into ourselves. So food for thought, things to think about. I think our next discussion is going to be around power by the sound of it.
Ooh.
Power and disempowerment. So we'll see you again in 2 weeks in the guide room. Thank you for joining us. Mahalo and a hui hou from me.
Yachikoham.
Bye.
Karati.
Hui hou.